Abbiamo Dani Moreno, preparatore dell'evento Verona, ci parlerà delle risposte fisiologiche durante il basket di elite, quindi ci porterà tutta la sua esperienza con un club professionistico. La parola a Dani.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the A.P.F.I.P organization and everyone else involved to make the event possible. It's always an honor to be invited and a pleasure to share with colleagues around Europe my thoughts and discuss about this kind of things. A few months ago, Dario texted me and he asked me if I could come, and I said, yes, I can come. And I asked him, what topic? And he told me, whatever you want. And after my latest appearances, I thought, okay, these guys are bold. It's gonna be risky. And I start to think about what can I present today. But finally, this come into my mind because this work has many links to Italy. Actually, for me, has the origin here in Italy, and it's my PhD work. It's a short version of it, but it's my PhD work. So let me put you into the situation. I started 2 decades ago. Okay, so in 2005, but the origin was a little bit earlier here in Italy, in 1985. In the second number of the Rivista di Cultura Sportiva appeared this article, this work by Colli and Faina, very popular, that for me changed everything. At the moment, we had like a lot of information of basketball players around their profile, how much they are able to jump or run or whatever into laboratory conditions, so into lab conditions. And you'll guess, okay, how you could find this article in a random Italian journal? Because 2 years after, it was translated to Spain in this journal, in red, and is very well known in Spain. At that moment, we start to know how much effort the players did during a game, how long were the pauses. We had data from the players' heart rate, some lactate, some stuff, and they broke down the actions into categories. So they could tell you how were the physiological response when running, shooting, defending. This was a very, very, very nice first approach. And 10 years after, it appeared this one that is also for me a benchmarking, that is the work by McInnes with Australian players. And with just a sample of 8, he made an outstanding job for me with a better breakout of the actions, better categorization, and with this nice continuum of the heart rate. So you can easily see how the game evolves from a physiological perspective. This was a very good first approach to me. And well, we have the basketball player. And when I start, we knew some things, a lot of things about their profile, how they can perform in laboratory conditions. And we knew very little about the game. We knew some things about heart rate and few things, but we knew a little about the game. And we start to mimic what this kind of works told us. We start to do efforts of 10 to 40 seconds, pauses variable also to 10 to 40 seconds, okay? And to mimic what Colin Fina, McInnes, and others told us before. But I always wonder if the profile that the journals or the papers show us was consequence of the game of basketball or how we train the players. Because maybe we were trying the players not in the way the game demands. And then I tried to start the research. That's my starting point. And I work in Barcelona in the physiology laboratory. And I was working with a group of experts in altitude training and things like that. And we had this beauty, K4B2, oxygen analyzer, CO2 analyzer, breath by breath, not like the K2, like the previous one. Heart rate integrated, GPS integrated, crazy. And guess what? Italian also. And then I wonder, okay, why not? And we start to put it into basketball players. And imagine how we can fit everything into a basketball player. We start to make some trials with a harness, higher, lower, with the battery in front, back, the analyzer, and all the cables, because there are many. And finally, this was the setup. You can see here, battery and the device in the back on the top, as high as possible. The cables on the non-dominant side, so you can shoot freely, okay? And, okay, we were ready to start the research. First nightmare, get subjects. ACB teams were not interested. So I had 3 at the beginning, but I didn't have access to top level data. So we wonder, okay, which is the level of the subject, or how we can define the better subject we can have to have a better insight of basketball. And I had access to top level under 18 players. So we decided that this was good for many reasons. They were after their PhD, so they were almost adults. The game was really developed in the under 18 tournament. And we had access to very good teams at the top level in Catalonia, in my region, and in Spain. And we had 30 subjects under 18, okay, of these clubs, top clubs at this level. And we want to assess the best players of each team during 4 seasons. And we ask the coaches who were the best performance now, but that can be also good performance in the future. I can tell you, 20 years after, that especially our international group was top level. Then we split to analyze based on role, guards, forward, center, and based on level. Guys who play with the national team and guys who don't play for the national team, because all of them play in the same league. They play in the Catalonian League and afterwards Spanish Championship. And we designed the research. First thing we did, we tried to look for an incremental test all out, to look for the VO2 max, but we decided to do it on the court instead of on the lab. We want something to be more ecological, more close to the reality of the game. And we choose this one, known as Course-Navette. Is developed in the French part of Canada, and is very well known in Spain. So I don't have to make a previous trial with the players, because all the schools have to done it in the under 14 and under 16. And afterwards, my dream, we put it in the games in simulated we call simulated games, but there were 5-on-5 between two teams. Friendly 5-on-5, but 5-on-5. And then we try to squeeze a lot the data to get the most we can, or the most we could, from the information we had. So we had all of this, and we compare between the two tests. We got energy expenditure, kinetics, zones, load, a lot of things. We had the chance to do a good pilot at the beginning and to do previous trials with all the data, so we could do all this. The 20-meter shuttle run, I think everyone knows it, but you run back and forth, and every minute the speed increases 0.5 kilometers per hour, okay, until exhaustion. And we had a chair by the court, so as soon as you finish, you sat, and we calculate your recovery. Okay, so we have the recovery curve of every player. You'll see for what. And then the game testing, second and biggest nightmare. For the game testing, we need an official court, easy. 2 teams with the coaches, not that easy. We play 10 minutes games, stopwatched, under FIBA rules, with the scoreboard at 0, and finishing this quarter, this game of 10 minutes, winning or losing. We had 1 mandatory timeout, you'll see why. And we need 1 referee, 1 cameraman, and 1 PC operator. 25 people or more for just getting 1 data set. I have 30. So a lot of work and a lot of people. As you can see, players could run with the ball, dribble, play one-on-one, dunk, push, whatever. We had no problems. And as you remember at the beginning, this continuum of McInnes of heart rate, for me was that. VO2, VCO2 during a game. Let's back to the 20-meter shuttle run. Okay, what we got from there. The beginning is not interesting because we cannot normalize it, but here we could obtain the first or the 2 thresholds and the VO2 max. And after we analyze the recovery. One breaking here, because that was very, very, very important to me, because I like to be super honest with the research. And a few years ago, it appeared one article by the group of David Bishop that they compared different methods to analyze the same trial in 1 professional cyclist. Okay? So all these methods are backed by science. All of them. All of them are trustable. But imagine how different is your prescription based on that. If you state that some lactate threshold is in here or in here, it's 50%, 60% difference. So at the time I had many methods to analyze this set of data. And I tried to run all of them. At the end, the gold standard was the expert visual inspection, okay? It wasn't like that, but you can see it in a visual way. We had all the data, all the numbers, okay? And we spot separately, 2 of us, where were the thresholds, okay? And then we put it in common. After, there were some authors at this moment that argue that the VO2 calculations, when you normalize VO2 to the mass, it should not be isometric. What means isometric? That you divide by the weight to the power of 1, so by the weight. And they say that the calculation should be allometric. So you should divide the VO2, the consumption, by the power of 2/3 or 3/4. So we tried it. At the end, the traditional method was the best, less error here in the bottom, and is the one we used after. So we move on. We also could calculate accumulated oxygen deficit, which is a marker of the supply, the previous supply of anaerobic energy that you need during the test. And we normalize it to the weight. And afterwards, we calculate the recovery itself using this calculation exponential of tau. Tau is plus or less the 63% of the overall response. But I had a problem at this moment. Since we have guys who perform better and guys who perform worse, I couldn't compare them because there are some that were worse, but they have to recover from less space. So this response was shorter. And I have to normalize somehow. And I decided to divide the whole response by the time. Then I asked some experts, I contacted some colleagues, I discussed about that. And finally we did that. And a brief story for researchers, I had a leak. One of my colleagues explained it somewhere, and someone published it without citing our job and our efforts to do so. But if you see this somewhere, okay, this was the origin. So then we could compare how fast the basketball players recover after one maximal effort. And is that important? Hell, for sure is that important. Look, this is 1 quarter play continuously. For sure it's important how they recover. And for me, it's a super understudied topic in physiology. Then we can provide data, VO2 max, thresholds, a lot of things, and compare with many authors that, with other methods, okay, they claim to have some values. As you can see, many Italians everywhere. And again, nice Italian contribution, the heart rate deflection point. I guess you all know it, developed by Conconi in the early 80s, is the break of the relationship between intensity and heart rate. So they tried to make some relation between this and the anaerobic threshold. So I want really to know if it was the first threshold or the second threshold or somewhere in between. So we put the whole data of the first threshold, second threshold, and VO2 max. And the deflection point lie in between of the second threshold and the VO2 max. So no relationship at all, nothing. 3 years ago, it appeared one paper with 2,500 subjects in which they did pretty much the same, finding that only 6% of the subjects had some relationship between the anaerobic threshold, measured it with ventilation, and the deflection point. So actually not a good method to evaluate metabolism. Okay, let's move on. Then we provide a lot of data with, for giving the coaches with just one heart rate band, okay, assessed through a 20-meter shuttle run. So you can do it even split for positions, guards, forwards, centers. And as I told you, imagine with this just set of 6 players, we had this outlier in here. But we didn't remove it because the data was good, so we keep it. And for sure, this makes that our error is much higher, but we kept it. And we moved to the game. we have the game, we have this beautiful continuum, and we can put both thresholds in it. And I answer one of my main questions that I didn't tell you yet. At the beginning, everybody was like making hypotheses about what was metabolically basketball. Aerobic, anaerobic, aerobic with peaks of whatever in between. But at this point I knew it because I had the answer. I know what basketball is metabolically. And then we can present some values of the game. Really high, as you can see, and made the difference between the positions, roles, whatever, and levels. We also could do individual regression, so we can give back our subjects an easy formula to, with a heart rate band, okay, calculate or have the load of their practices or their games even. And we made these two things. Try to predict in-game through our game test or our 20 meters shuttle run test, okay, which is the response. This was bad, a lot of error, but this was terribly good. This is amazing. So with this algorithm and one heart rate band in a similar sample, you can know how much they are spending in a regular basketball game. This is probably the main finding, the main thing we can add to the basketball knowledge. But we wanted more. So after having the two heart rate corresponding to both thresholds, we put them here in a game, and we use the Bannister model to calculate training impulse. So we had a measure of load, multiplying the time passed on zone 1 per 1, the time passed on zone 2 per 2, and the time passed on zone 3 per 3. And we also can do this during practices with a heart rate band, easily. And we provide, at least to my knowledge, the first data to compare among players. But we want also a little bit more. So we decide to know how much they spend playing. Actually, it looks that energy supply is not important in basketball because it's not super demanding, because the event is short. But it can be a problem when you play a tournament, or it can help you for improving recovery. And we had all this data from our players, but someone told us that you don't have to normalize to mass. You have to do it to body mass, to body surface area. So we did it also. And finally, we got this. And we compared it to the previous literature. And we realized how high was our response in terms of energy production or energy expenditure compared to previous authors. At least 25% higher, if not even more. And finally, takeaway findings. Okay, first, during the game, players reach values of VO2 close to VO2 max. Game tests show validity to estimate VO2 max through heart rate. Game is played at really high levels of the most of variables. Basketball players have a super high aerobic profile, having their thresholds both super high. So I ask Also, one question at the beginning. I know how to train them now. VO2 max in players is medium compared to other sports. We knew that before me for sure. Shuttle run values should be used with caution because it's in specific and it didn't work well to predict anything. We present some reference with training impulse data to compare. Recovery values. Forwards tend to perform better at the early beginning of the research in basketball. Who were the role who performed better? Were the guards. Right now the forwards, they run more, they run faster, and they have, in most of the things, better indicators, higher values of everything. And higher level players perform better. And finally, energy expenditure is much higher than we expect. And let me give you, if you want my dissertation and want to consult everything or want anything, okay, is in here in that link, okay, but I'm sorry. It's in Catalan, so if you want anything, I can translate it and I can give the information and anything, but as I told you, I decided not to publish it for personal reasons. And my last slide, just a remember of my mentor, Dr. Rodriguez, who made a huge impact in physiology, especially applied to the swimming and altitude. And we're done. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.